state government involved in doing it. I have a specific idea for the 6th district. That's to take the old Fort Ritchie, with which I'm very familiar. It used to be called Site R back in my days in the Pentagon. And there are still buildings there. There are still adequate facilities there, and I believe that should be transformed into a rehab center. It can be done without a lot of funding. What it will really take, however, is commitment and the resources to get the right people to manage it, and I will work on that. On the other hand, we also need to look at the source problem. I think we need to have a much better control of the prescription of opioids in particular. I think they are clearly oversubscribed or overprescribed by a lot of doctors. I had a conversation with several doctors the other day about how we can handle that, and one of the ways is to revise the medical protocols for this. Right now, it is based very much on personal views of how much pain you're suffering, and we need to have a slightly more objective way of addressing that. The doctors prescribe X amount of opioid pain medication under specific circumstances, and we need to have that reviewed, and we also need to have it monitored, which can be done today with the new technology, to stop people from doctor shopping and going to multiple doctors to get multiple prescriptions. This will both cut down on individual addicts, and it will cut down on the available stuff on the streets. So those are the approaches that I would take. Thank you.
Sure. But I agree with a lot of the things that Ami just said. I mean, I think we have to take a step back. Obviously, what's causing a lot of this is economic distress, the breakdown of communities, and the breakdown of families in a lot of ways, right? And those are interrelated, right? So unless we really actually revive the economy in a more broad-based way, we're going to continue to have issues like this. Second issue is how we think about it as the healthcare crisis and mental health care crisis that it really is. The mental health care system in this country is completely broken, right? There's been some reforms before the Congress, of which I'm supportive of. That's a whole other discussion, but it's related to this. There's a lot of specific issues around trying to get at the issues with what's going on with pharmaceutical companies. And let's face it, the pharmaceutical companies in this country have run a little roughshod on our citizens in a lot of different ways, right? We look at what's happened with this EpiPen, which my wife carries around. I mean, it's just staggering what they've done on some of this stuff. At a minimum, we should be letting the United States government negotiate with pharmaceutical companies to get the best deal. The fact that the largest buyer of drugs can't negotiate with them, right, just shows the power that they have, which is not good. I mean, there's no place in the United States of America, which is a capitalistic free market system, which I obviously fully support, where the largest buyer can't negotiate a deal. We're not allowed to do that. That shows the power they have. So they've, you know, I wouldn't say they're certainly not behind any of this, but we just need to make sure that they're not overly pushing prescriptions of these medications. We need to do better things around tracking how many prescriptions someone has, making sure there's more transparency around some of these prescriptions so that people know that they're being done. But then finally, in terms of treatment, there's a tremendous number of programs, many of which are small, many of which are community-based, religious-based, that have been very successful at treating patients because it's very personal, right? They really get involved in their lives. It's not a big bureaucracy. And they're doing innovative things, like connecting to experts using teleconference so someone can actually really access someone at Hopkins if they need to do a specific treatment on an individual, so the local provider is actually using telemedicine to get the kind of expertise you need. And I think that's one of the reasons I've been involved in these kind of public-private partnerships, social impact bonds, pay for success, which is really getting more money, a mix of government money and private money, in the hands of operators that are kind of small, nimble, and community-based, because I think they can be very successful in managing, and they need to be empowered and have more resources.
Another question? Yeah, Dave.
How do your positions and philosophies handle the conflicting demands of energy and the environment?
Sure. So look, when we think about, let's talk about energy first, and then kind of tie into the environment. So when I think about energy, it's really funny. A lot of young people come up to me because of my background in business and say, you know, what field should I go in? And my advice to them is always go in the energy business, because the way we produce, distribute, and conserve energy in 50 years is just going to be very different than the way it is today. There's basically an advanced energy economy that's coming down the pipe, and is, by the way, creating an enormous number of jobs, an enormous number of jobs. And a lot of this is based on how people want to live, right? They want to live in a cleaner world, right? They want cleaner energy. A lot of this is based on dollars and cents, right? Actually trying to lower the cost of energy. And we've had a bit of an energy revolution in this country, which has really actually lowered the cost of energy and actually changed fundamentally the country's dependence upon other sources of energy, which has been a total blessing. But there's also issues of climate change that are occurring that I actually agree with, right? I think the data is pretty clear on this. You know, 98 out of 100 serious scientists believe this is a problem. And I know if I took one of my kids to 100 doctors, and 98 of them said I should do something about it, I wouldn't wait to convince the last 2. I would do something about it. The US military calls this a risk multiplier. I happen to believe the US military is pretty good at assessing risk. And they believe that climate change is in fact a risk multiplier. And the reason they say this is because they're traveling the world and paying attention. They see what's happened in Syria, where 10 million people have been displaced from their homes. It's completely thrown the world kind of off kilter. And they see places, there's a strong correlation between people living in poverty and whether they live at or below sea level. They see what can happen when changing weather patterns will displace people. Right? That's really the risk associated with climate change. Having said that, I also think when you embrace an advanced energy economy, you have the ability to be, you know, they call this, the term that they use in business called first mover advantage. Meaning if you're number one at something, right, and you get ahead of everyone else, you have such embedded advantages that it's hard for people to compete with you. I think the United States, if it's getting its energy policy right, which to me, to get energy policy right, we should be having market-based solutions, not regulatory solutions. Largely, we've relied on regulatory solutions. The president put in place these limitations on greenhouse gases, right, which is a regulatory solution. It would have been much better to do a market-based solution, which is what I've advocated for. Because if you look at all of the, literally almost all the Fortune 500 companies, including ExxonMobil, the largest energy company in the world, they all are modeling in their financial projections that there'll be a price on carbon. So when all the scientists think we should price carbon, and when all the leading companies in the world believe we should price carbon, I think it's time for us as policymakers to actually have that discussion. So that's what I propose to do. And I fundamentally believe if you get this right, if you go more with a market-based solution versus a regulatory solution, you're basically betting on US business. You're basically betting on US business. And I would never bet against US business's ability to innovate and solve a problem. So what I've proposed is we put a market-based solution in for the pricing of carbon, right? And as part of that, there could be massive regulatory relief, by the way. What the revenues that are generated from that market-based solution are used for is to provide tax credit to lower-income Americans so that they get an offset against any increase in their energy prices so it doesn't hurt them. We also propose to set aside 2% of the revenues from this bill for coal workers so that you pay for their retirement and their health care and job training for the rest of their lives. Because I believe if the government does an action, it's fundamentally good for all the citizens, but it actually hurts one narrow group of individuals. It has a responsibility to do something about it. It has a clear responsibility to do something about it. And then the rest is providing tax relief to businesses large and small so they can be more competitive. I think that's a much more competitive solution. I happen to have the only bipartisan bill in the Congress dealing with climate. So when I think about energy, I'm focused on the advanced energy economy. I'm focusing on how we transition ourselves so we can be as competitive as a nation on this issue as possible. I'm focusing on how we position ourselves so it has the least impact to our citizens and creates the most jobs. By the way, many more jobs by multiples are being created in renewables right, than the carbon-based industry, like factors of 10 or 20. And costs are coming down. You know, solar, the cost of solar power has gone down every time we've doubled the installed base of solar. The price of solar has gone down 28%. There's something in computing called Moore's Law, right, which says that computing power is going to double every 2.3 years. It's basically Moore's Law for solar, which says every time we double the installed base, the price has gone down 28%. This will continue because it's gone down over multiple doublings. There's no question solar is going to be cheaper than traditional sources of energy based on the technological innovation. But that's because we position the industry to actually get some traction. And we've done it, in fact, with tax subsidies. But by the way, to say there weren't tax subsidies in the oil industry when we had to maintain a massive military presence in the Middle East and to keep the shipping lanes open and the cost of American treasure and lives to do that, to say that that's not a tax on the American people is just not true, by the way. So that's my view. It's very forward-looking. It's thinking about the advanced energy economy. It's making sure we do it in a market-based solution, in a pro-growth strategy, and having specific programs to affect those who have been negatively affected by what's going on.
That was a long answer, and I agree with most of it. I absolutely agree that this needs to be market-based, but I would take the government out of it even further. And I would take a shorter-term view, because I think we have to worry about the people that are being damaged by the current government regulations that hamper our energy business today. I want to worry about the people that are here in Allegheny County and out of jobs today, and how do we fix that without worrying as much about what happens 20, 50 years from now. In the long run, my personal view is that nuclear energy is perhaps the safest and the most cost-effective and the least environmentally damaged source of energy. There are problems with it, of course, and the main one being the nuclear waste repository. I worked on the Yucca Mountain project for many years, on and off, and I think if we can solve the nuclear waste management problem, we can go back to a nuclear energy as one of the bases of our broad energy policy. And that's all I'll say about that at this point.
Well, one more question, make the question brief, and hopefully the answers will be brief too.
Ami, this question is directed to you. In your platform, you advocate the closing of Planned Parenthood clinics. Being a pro-choice woman, I am to assume that you are 100% pro-life. Is that correct?
No, it's actually not. And as a matter of fact, I have never suggested closing them. What I have suggested is getting the government out of the business. Let me use an analogy that I often use. First off, let me start out by stating I personally would not have an abortion, but I think it is not the government, not the federal government's role to take my position and impose it on anyone else. My view on Planned Parenthood is that we don't ask the government to fund grocery stores, do we? But we do provide food stamps and food support for people that need food. I believe we should go to a system for that sort of thing that provides vouchers and people can go to whatever providers they wish. I think we can support people without supporting the institutions that they may or may not choose to go to.
Thank you, Ami.
Yeah, I think the government should continue to provide funding to Planned Parenthood. I think it's a very important organization for women's health. And some of the issues they deal with are issues that women don't even quite know about. And their outreach services, et cetera, I think are really important, which is why I think voucherizing it is not appropriate. And that's why I support continued government funding of Planned Parenthood. On this issue, I think, you know, as a Catholic, my wife and I follow the teachings of our church as it relates to our personal beliefs, but I believe that it's not the federal government's role to determine women's reproductive choices within the limits of the system.
thank both of you very, very much for your good answers. And thank you for being patient.
John,
And
could we possibly have one more question that's related to our organization?
you have one, Dave?
I do, yes. Our organization is committed to protect pensions, which essentially are a state issue. The pensions are only a part of our support. What are your positions about the retaining, the restricting, the protecting, the securing, the enhancing of the Social Security program?
So again, I have the only bipartisan bill in the Congress on Social Security reform, the only one. And everyone knows this is a big problem. I mean, Social Security in a nutshell, since inception, this is a remarkably successful program. Since inception, it's been positive, meaning more money has been paid in than is paid out. So it's positive since inception, but on an annual basis, we now pay out more money than we take in. So Social Security has a deficit every year, but it's got a cumulative positive balance. That'll change in 2031, which means the amount we pay out on a cumulative basis will exceed the amount we pay in, which means one of two things happen. Either the benefits get cut by 25%, which would be catastrophic, or we shift all the liabilities of Social Security on the balance sheet of the government, which would not be as catastrophic as cutting the benefits 25%, but would have very serious financial implications to the debt of the country, and will go from, call it 75% of our GDP to over 100%. So that's a clear problem in 2031, and it's utterly irresponsible that lawmakers have not dealt with it, considering how enormously successful this program is. Enormously successful this program. And so what Tom Cole and I, who's a Republican from Oklahoma, have done, and Tom's a very conservative guy by nature, is we sat down and we said, let's think about what we should be doing. And we had slightly different views as to what we should do to fix the program. But we look back over how the program's been dealt with in the past. And it turns out in the 70s, we had a very similar fact set, meaning Social Security was at deficit on an annual basis and was going to about to have a cumulative deficit. And so what Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did, in a bipartisan way, back at the time when people actually tried to get together and do things, is they set up the